everyone. Welcome to another Mango Publishing Heart Wisdom panel. Today is super special because today we get to hear directly from publisher Brenda Knight. And Brenda, I just want to say thank you for making this special time. I know you show up for all the Heart Wisdom panels, but I know that just hearing from you, we're going to learn a lot. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm going to learn a lot too. I always do.
So I was thinking about how in the world do I introduce someone who is, you're the publisher of Mango Publishing. You have, how many books do you have? Do you
Oh,
know?
wow. I haven't counted recently, but I think I've probably written like 16 books.
I love that. And just to give people a little taste, and you can throw in some other titles, but we've got Random Acts of Kindness, Badass Affirmations, Be a Good in the World. You have books on friendship. You have books on awesome Black women. You have books on self-care. What am I missing?
Mhm.
I mean, I know there's still some categories that I might be missing.
Well, the Book of Awesome Women and the Book of Awesome Girls, which is very
Yes.
cool. Yeah. And then Random Acts of Kindness, and gratitude. Gratitude is a big thing for me. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So you have all these books, obviously a huge, wonderful job where I know personally, and I've talked to so many authors who you supported and, nourished. And I know that you do blogging. I know that you're, in a family. Like, where do we start? What do you want to talk about first?
Well, I think maybe like just start at the beginning. I mean, like I sometimes marvel that I get to do work that I love, and work with people that are like such creative people doing such important work, like you. But like I think for me, it all started like in the first grade when I was going to school in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is where I'm originally from. And my first grade teacher, Mrs. Gammon, was this really cool woman that was very well traveled. She'd been like all around the world, and she would do special things like, to us little first country kids, country first graders. Like I remembered very distinctly that like she wore a kimono one day, and like she wanted to tell us about, Japan and Japanese culture. And like she was opening the world to us, kids. And in my case, I would like grew up on a holler, and what that means is like a dirt road. Like I grew up on a farm on a dirt road in West Virginia, which was like such a beautiful, beautiful place. But like you're sort of, you're not exposed to the world like when you're up a holler. But like Mrs. Gammon, like, like with her beautiful generosity and like open heart and like teacher, like really good teacher, she was very gently opening our eyes and minds to like, the greater world. And like, so at the end of the first grade, um, she held my little hands in hers and said, "I can't wait to see the books you write."
What?
Yes. And so I actually didn't even think about that for years and years and years. Well, I mean, especially like in the first grade, you're not that reflective, right? But I think actually when I started writing books, and my first book was The Women of the Beat Generation, like which was very important to me. And that was like a mission. But in any case, like I think at a certain point I sort of thought like, oh, you did it. Like you wrote a book. Oh, wow. And then I was like, it popped into my mind like that Mrs. Gammon had inoculated me with self-esteem. And that like I'm so grateful I dedicated a book to her, and like, several years later. and you know, I just like think like how lucky was I? How lucky were all the kids that she taught? Like because like she, I mean, I think she knew that like we were in like, you know, West Virginia is beautiful, but it's one of the poorest states in America. And, you know, that hasn't changed. And like, you know, it's very rural, it's sort of backward, you know, and I think she had a mission, and I think her mission was to like just give all her students like a boost, maybe point them in the right direction. And she nailed it with me.
How did she see that? What do you think? Like, were you writing poetry or little verse, or what did she see?
Well, I became like an avid reader. I mean, like I like didn't go to kindergarten because like my aunt Ruth had told my mom that like kindergarten like wasn't good, and that like she thought like it didn't help her kids, and like so I didn't go to kindergarten, so I didn't learn to read until I went to the first grade. And so then like, but once I learned to read, like I was just on fire, and I wanted to like just read and read and read and read. And I went like beyond like the, you know, the like the primer books like pretty quickly. So I think that Mrs. Gammon thought like, well, that kid sure loves books. And then I think she just saw some spark in me, like maybe the way I talked, because my two sisters, I'm the youngest kid of three daughters, and my sisters were in like they were in middle school and high school by the time I was in the first grade. So like they, you know, I listened to how they talked. They talked on a more mature level. And
Right.
so I spoke on a much more mature level. I had an expanded vocabulary from my sisters, and then also from reading so much. So I think that she just saw a spark in me that like not only is she going to read a lot of books, but like she's going to write a lot of books. And like, you know, and like, you know, in the bonus, like bonus part of the bargain is that I publish many books.
I know, Brenda, I can't help but think that you've paid this forward, you know, 1,000 times over. And it's such a beautiful way. Does she know? Like, I know you said you dedicated some books to her, but did she know that?
She passed, but like when I would go, when I moved to California, like and would visit West Virginia, I did like contact her like the first time I came back and thanked her. And at that time, I think I was still working in the import export industry, but like, you know, I was working for like a multinational company, you know, so I had a great job and like lived in a big cool city. And I think she was pretty proud of that. I hadn't yet moved into publishing, but that's directly related. I mean, you've heard that story of how I got into publishing, right?
No.
Oh, wow.
This
Okay.
would be great. I love hearing. This is why it's so great to have you all by yourself today.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell
All
us.
right. Well, yeah. So, like, maybe because of Mrs. Gammon, like, I thought I wanted to be an international businesswoman. Now, I have no idea, like, how I like came up with that. Like, because again, like we know, I grew up on a dirt road, like on a farm, and you know, it was very rural and you know, and not international at all. But like I just had this idea that I was gonna like graduate from college, and then I was gonna become an international businesswoman, even though I was an English major. Like, so I moved to San Francisco. I was gonna move to Boston. My best friend and I were moved together, Kimberly, and Krishna knows her very, very, very well. And yeah, so like we were going to move to Boston, but our friends that we were going to stay with said like, "Oh my goodness, like we got like the like a bill like from like, you know, their equivalent of PG&E, like their bill for like heat and gas and electricity, and they said it was like $300 a month." And like I was like, oh my goodness, like we can't pay that, like that just seems like insane, like that like we were hoping that we just would pay that for rent, you know. Little did we know about San Francisco. But anyway, so I said, why don't we move where we won't need heat?
I love that.
Yeah, so we drove to San Francisco, like drove across America. That was very exciting and like
Wow.
really, that was thrilling. And so then I got a job my first day in San Francisco because when I got there and the friends that, we had a couple of friends that we were going to stay with, and they were telling us like how expensive it was and what rent rates were and like the cost of food and like all this and that. And so I said, oh, I've got to get a job. So I went and walked downtown San Francisco and then went into a building that I saw had like a personnel agency in it. And I went and, got an interview with them. And I got a job at Morgan Stanley brokerage, if you can imagine it, on my first day. Yeah, I know.
This is so
Yeah,
good.
and in fact, I had a if my friends can see me now moment, because Morgan Stanley is that octagonal building on Market Street in San Francisco. So you have a view of every bridge. So it was I remember just thinking, oh my God, if people can see where I am now, they would be amazed. I was blown away. I couldn't get over it. And I had to get up really early and be at work at 5 a.m. or actually I think it was 4:45
Oh my
for
gosh.
the stock market, because it was connected to Wall Street. And then I then they were saying okay, now you have to get an MBA. And I was burned out of college. I said, oh, I don't want to go to college again. I just want to work. And they were like, well, if you're on the track, you have to do this. So then I switched jobs. I went back to the personnel agency and I said, this is the kind of job I want. And so I got a job at an import-export, one of the largest import-export companies in America. And I loved that because I was one of the few Caucasians. It was people from all around the world, from Guam, from Greece, from India, from China, from Japan, from all over the world. And I loved that. I just loved working with people from all around the world.
Yeah.
Very exciting to me. And so then I was I think I answered the phones. I think I was the receptionist for a first job. And then I got into sales and that seemed to go well. And then, but I really wanted to be a buyer because the idea of shopping, going around the world and shopping on somebody else's dime, that seemed to me that was a great job. And so I decided that I let the owner know that that's what I wanted to do. And then finally, it took some years, a few years, but finally I got the promotion. Okay, you're now a buyer, and we're going to go on our first buying trip next month. Make sure that you have your passport all ready to go. And then he said, and I'm going to show you the factories and the places we're going to go. So we were going to go to Portugal, China, Taiwan, and India. And so I had not been out of the country. Wow. So this was not only my first big trip, it was my first international trip at all. So I was so excited. And then we had a meeting. It was just him and me, the owner, founder of the company. And he showed me, he brought in really, they were photography. They were it was almost they were memory books with photos of the places and almost, yeah. And so scrapbooks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was sort of mystified by that. And then but what really bamboozled me was when he opened up the factory in India. And I knew that all of the products that we imported from India, many of them had to be lacquered. so they had to be like, so like it was like tea sets and like candlesticks and like, all kinds of objet and decorative items
Huh.
and things like that. And like they have to be lacquered, so that they stay silver, so that they were like silver and like other kinds of metals, and they needed to be lacquered to keep the sheen. And so I saw that like the factory where like the tea sets were made, there were children like sitting there making the products, and I said like, there's children working at like the factories.
Oh.
And he said, yeah, yeah. And I said, oh, wow, I had no idea. Like, and like, I wasn't hiding. I mean, I was just like reacting like in real time, and he could see on my face that I was like a bit horrified. And then I said, these products that are made here, they have to be lacquered. These kids are spray painting.
Oh.
I don't see masks. I don't see fans. I don't see ventilation.
Oh.
And then he was like, he was starting to get irritated by my attitude and my questions. And he said, they consider themselves lucky to have those jobs. And he said, you should feel lucky to have your job too. And then I said, they're going to cough up their lungs before they're 12 years old.
Oh, Brenda.
Which is true.
Oh,
Like,
Brenda.
that is very harmful to your lungs, very harmful. Like, just spraying stuff, like painting with
Right.
no ventilation, no masks, no fans. And like, he looked at me like, like I had just, zoomed in from outer space. And actually, I felt like I was having an out of body experience. And I remember like sort of like floating up and watching Brenda, like, like just be honest with him about like, and the reason I really, really knew about like what happens when you spray paint with no fans and no masks and all that and ventilation was because like my little high school job in the summers was working at a car dealership.
Oh.
So I like did whatever was needed. I worked in the parts department. I like drove cars from like one car lot to another, blah blah blah. And my favorite coworkers were like the people in the body shop, because like they like listened to rock and roll music. They were creative, like they were artists. It's just that they were, fixing cars and repainting cars and things like that. One of my favorite guys, like he was sort of like really sweet elder man, a little macho. And I guess he thought like wearing masks and stuff like that was like, like not macho enough for him. And like he tried, and like I would say like, I told you need to wear a mask because like I want you to stay around for years, and like, you're my friend and I want you around for years. And then like one time I saw him coughing up blood.
Oh.
Yeah. And so that really imprinted upon my like, 16-year-old brain. And so I realized that like that's what was happening to those kids that worked in that factory in India. That was what was going to happen, which is why I said they're going to cough up their lungs before they're 12. And like he would like, no one had ever talked to him like that before. And it wasn't that I was deliberately being sassy or whatever. I was just being honest. But like I said, I can't participate in exploitation of children. I really thank you for the opportunity. But
Wow.
like I can't do this. And so I quit my job. I left. I like was, and like as we know, like I didn't have a lot of money. And so like, I was literally thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to pay next month's rent? So like, what am I going to do? But I had to do it. I couldn't participate in that. I just
Wow.
I came in the next day, like to like pack up my desk and everything, and like shake his hand and say thank you again. I was at least going to be like gracious. I'm like way out. And I could see that he respected me, actually. He was
Huh.
really like, he was just a real hard ass. I mean, I'll just say it. Like, he was a total hard ass. But like, I could really tell that he was like impressed, even though he wasn't happy about it. Like that, like I took a stand for like what I believed in, what I knew was right. So then this is how we get to publishing.
I know. This is so. I'm so on the edge of my seat because I've never heard this. What?
Yeah.
How did it happen?
So I had a best friend, Maria Varay, and I like called her and I was sobbing and sobbing, like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Like, I figured I would have to just be like a waitress, like wait tables, like get 2 or 3 jobs, like waiting tables or coffee shop or whatever, like, to have enough money to like just live in San Francisco. And she said, she listened and she was very sympathetic and like very understanding. And she said, all you really want to do is like talk about books and what you're reading. And she said, you should work in publishing.
Oh.
And she helped me get an informational interview at HarperCollins. And I talked my way into a job.
What? On an informational interview?
Yes.
Brenda.
Well, I mean, I wanted to work in publishing, but I had a fire under myself. Like, I had to work. I had to get a job. Like, I needed to, keep a roof over my head and all that. And, but yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful, like, to her for thinking of it. I don't think I would have thought of it on my own.
Oh, wow. Even though your teacher had told you way back when.
Right. I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was like, I mean, I can't even begin to express like how emotional and heartbroken I was, because I realized that like my dream job was a nightmare.
You know what? I can't help but think, and I'm sure this has occurred to you too. You went from that possible, I mean, I know you left that job where people were being harmed to books that save lives.
Yes.
I'm so struck by that. I'm just so struck by this arc of your career.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was a long, winding road to get there, but like, yeah, I mean, there couldn't be any. I mean, aside from being like a doctor or like a first responder, like there couldn't be more important work, like saving lives.
Well, and you give a voice to the first responders, to the doctors, to the people. I mean, that's the thing. And I love this opportunity to talk to you about this because that is so beautiful to hear your story. And we had promised in the title, we said passion, purpose, and to-do lists.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I feel like what you just did was really spoke to how that passion, how you really stayed true to that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, it is like, when you look back on your life, like which I think we all do, that actually is like, all of the psychologists, like I've published that you've talked to, our wisdom, like Eric Meisel, like, Dr. John Duffy, on and on. Like, in the maturation of like, humans, like there's like the quarter life, it's called the quarter life crisis, but I think it's a quarter life review. And then the midlife crisis, which I prefer to call it a midlife review. But at that juncture, midlife, people do start thinking about their life and like, what is the meaning of it? And like, am I doing what I was meant to do here on this planet? And I feel enormously lucky to say yes, but it wasn't like, but it was like sort of this accidental like path to it, where my friend Maria, just said, all you want to talk about is like the books you're reading and like books and like you should just be in publishing where you could like be paid to talk about books.
Bless her heart. Is Maria, if you're listening to this now or in the future, we love you. I mean,
yeah,
isn't that beautiful? I mean, because she saw you, which,
Yes.
is one of my passions, is that we see one another, and that she reflected that to you. And not
Right.
only did it change the course of your life, but I repeat, countless, not just all the authors you've helped, but all the people who've been helped by the authors you've helped. We couldn't even, it's like, sand on a beach,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I feel like super, super blessed to like work with creative people and authors, and especially like authors of books that save lives, because like they have a mission too. And so I think I remember like reading like The Tipping Point, like I think like 15 years ago, like on a plane to Boston. And like he said that there's like different kinds of people, and one of them is connectors. And I remember when I was reading like the chapters about connectors, I thought, oh, I'm a connector, but like not just a connector of people, but also like connecting like people with ideas, because part of what I do, well, I did that with you
I
not
know
so long ago.
you
I
did.
said, like, there's this need for this kind of book. And I actually think you're the person like to do this. And what I'm talking about is like the love list of a lifetime.
I love that. And thank you. Thank you. Right? Like that was a perfect example. And this is a good time for me to bring in, because I know there's so many directions to go, but one of my favorite things about you, and one of the most interesting, I think, is your combination of being like a really amazing businesswoman and a woman with real heart and spirituality and intuitive sense, which a lot of
Mhm.
times, those two don't go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, that accidental wending way that like I just shared about getting to publishing, I mean, it started out with like, Morgan Stanley, which was like a very important like financial institution. I mean, I like sometimes whenever I like tell some people like tell that story too, and they're like, if you'd stayed at that job, you'd be a millionaire. And I'd be like, well, okay, maybe. I don't know. Like that doesn't really matter, like to me. Like, as we all know, I want money to like keep a roof over my head and be able to buy coffee and candles. Yeah. But in any case, like I mean, if that's how I was built, I would have stayed there and I would have gotten an
Right.
MBA. But then also like in import export, and then my first job at HarperCollins was sales and marketing. So I think that like that gave me a good grounding. I remembered like this just popped in, so I feel like sharing it. Like I was when I first I like to like sort of joke that like I rolled in off like a hay wagon like from West Virginia to San Francisco. And like I had more of an accent. I know I still have just a little touch of an accent, and people think like that maybe I'm from Texas or something, but I'm San Francisco, Virginian, I guess. But like people made me a little self-conscious about my accent and things like that. And then like, but this funny thing happened like when I was working at Morgan Stanley, and like I would be talking to the brokers who were like New Yorkers, like I mean when I was talking to like Wall Street, like
Right.
right, Wall Street like stockbrokers, and like they could immediately tell that I was from the South, and some of them like even were able to say like identify it as a West Virginia
Wow.
accent. And so like a couple of them that I talk to most often, like as part of my job, like they actually like loved my accent. They loved that I was from West Virginia. And one of them somehow said something to me that like made me realize that he didn't say it like this, but it made me realize that actually I should not only not be embarrassed by being from West Virginia, that it actually is an asset. And and so then I was like, oh, being from West Virginia is like my superpower. And so then instead of like hiding it or being embarrassed
Oh,
in any way, I would like say right up front, like when I was meeting people or whatever, like, well, I'm originally from West Virginia, like, born on like a farm, like, and like, so that's who I am. and it was so like different, because they're very different. So anyway, it just popped into my mind that so I got like inoculated, with self-esteem by Mrs. Gannon, my first grade teacher, and then again by like these like wheeler dealer stockbrokers from New York just talking to me on the phone. And like they made me realize, like, actually it's really, really cool. Where I'm from, my humble origins, it's awesome. Work it. So I never stopped working it.
Hey, as you're talking about this, how do you see that those roots, as you call them, your humble origins, because
Mhm.
I see you as someone who is incredibly energetic, and when you set your mind to something, you do it. I mean, I would call you a go-getter. How do you
Yeah.
think those roots played into the woman that you are today?
Well, my parents, like, and my whole family, very hardworking people. So I think I was also like inoculated with like you got to work hard, and that and that it's something to be proud of too. Like whatever work you do is like something to be proud of. Like so like being a farmer, like, I mean, those are the people that are like feeding America. Like, so that's nothing to be embarrassed about. Like but it also is very grounding. I mean, literally
Really?
grounding. Because I do love gardening, and like wherever I live, like even when I lived in like apartments in San Francisco, if there was like a patch of like dirt, I could like plant a little garden in. I would do wherever I lived, there's a garden. And like I actually have left gardens behind me.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know what? I love that because I'm guessing one of my questions for you, and I'm going to jump to it because I think it may be related. One of my questions was about self care. And do you
Mm.
feel as if I don't want to project onto you, but gardening feels like it would be such a way to nourish yourself as you're nourishing something else? But is that so?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, in fact, I have joked that like weeding is my therapy, and it's very true. Like I like to weed because like, well, it's something productive, and then like and I'm a big composter. Like, anything that can possibly be composted is going to get composted. So there's no yeah, and like that is weirdly something that I started doing like back on the farm in West Virginia. Like I convinced my family to become organic gardeners because I read a book on organic gardening.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, it's actually easier. Organic gardening is actually easier and cheaper. So like, but and that was my pitch to them, like, and it worked. But and it leaves beauty behind, like if you weed. And so like I will in between meetings, like I think probably between like right before noon, I will stop and gaze at my garden. If I don't have a chance to like go out and be in it, I will just look at it, because like I just drink in the beauty,
Oh,
and I have like certain flowers and plants and trees that I love, and I will just I mean, it's like a mini meditation or something like that. But I just like drink in the beauty, and it like feeds me. It's like fuel.
wow. That is beautiful. Now we have
Mm.
to go back. We have to go back and see, like, so how did you go from sales and marketing to becoming a prolific writer and publisher? What was that jump?
Yes. Well, in the sales and marketing department, like we always went, the sales folks, including myself, we got to go to all the editorial boards. And so I got to see how the sausage was made. And like the proposal and the presentation and the research that needs to be done, like sales research and gathering data, like even like in that sort of primordial way where like before Google existed, actually, so you just like had to get information, like, the old fashioned way, and like books and things like that. So I liked it. And then like I took note of like the best sellers. Like that was always interesting to me. Like, what are the books that sell the best? Because like that means it's really speaking to the readers. The
Right.
readers are really getting something out of that. Like this, you're giving the readers what they want. And so it just made like perfect sense to me that if some things were doing really well, that like you should extrapolate from that. So I would go to like the editors and like a couple of key people and say like, I think we should do this kind of book. And I think one of the first ones that I suggested was books on angels, like, yeah. And then like books on like saints and like, sort of and because I was seeing that like those books were succeeding and that they could be sort of made more popular, more accessible,
Right.
less like super religious and more like sort of a more pop culture like gift take
Yeah.
on it. And like I think we did like 365 saints and 365 angels,
Oh.
and they worked really, really well. And so then people were like, well, like Brenda has good book ideas. So it went from me having good book ideas to then like saying like, well, actually, like, you should be an acquiring editor so that
Oh,
like you can find the authors, to match your book ideas, or be pitched good book ideas by authors and writers. And so it was just a very natural progression.
wow. Right. And I know you've got a story, which, I would love to hear again, and many people may not have heard about how you got into sort of the kindness and gratitude and the do good world that,
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes, right. Well, at a certain point, I mean, I learned so much at HarperCollins. I mean, it was like being paid to go to publishing school. It really was. And I just couldn't get over like getting free books. Like they had like a hallway that had like a bunch of bookshelves, and they were like books that anyone could just have. And I mean, I think they were like, because, almost any time there's a printing of a book, there's overprinting, and it could be like several hundred copies. So I think that's what they did. Those were like the overprintings, like, and like, I have so many books still that I took from those free bookshelves. But at a certain point, I was like, am I really like because HarperCollins is a multinational, like it's a multinational corporation. It's the second largest publisher in the world. And like, like if you have one job, like that's your lane, like, like,
Ah,
whereas at like, Mango and other jobs I had, like I could do two or three things. So, but like, I just thought, I just don't know if I want to work for Rupert Murdoch anymore.
ah,
Yeah. And I think I made the right decision. And of course, this was like, I think Fox News had like barely begun. So it was nothing about politics. It was just a vibe. It
yeah.
was just a vibe that I had like learned everything I could. I mean, that's probably not true, but I felt like I learned a lot. And that like, it was just felt like the time to move on. And so a good friend of mine had a good friend of hers that worked at Canary Press. And
Hmm.
like they were books on gratitude and kindness and patience and like those simple virtues, and a lot of feminist books too. That's really
Right,
where I got my like taste for like awesome women books and feminist books.
right.
Yeah. And so I went and interviewed there and got the job, and then like Random Acts of Kindness like was like a huge hit, and like sold like I think 2.5 million copies in like just maybe like 2 or 3 years, and became like a movement.
Yeah.
And I loved that, like Sure, at HarperCollins, that was great, and those books were very meaningful because there are like a lot of spirituality books and wisdom traditions, very, very meaningful. But this was like a different kind of meaningful work where the direct intention is making it a better world. And
Right.
like once I like started like working with those kind of books and authors and publishing, like I found my lane. I found my lane.
Oh, I love this. It's really fun. I don't know for you. I hope it is, but just hearing the journey, and I know for anyone listening, it's really helpful when you get to hear, right? When you get to hear someone's journey, especially I'm going to say for young people who sometimes feel like, "Oh, I have to know." But sometimes
Yeah.
we don't, right? Sometimes like you just said it, I found my lane. And sometimes
Yeah.
we have to like be in movement in order to find our lane. You got to be driving down some path.
Mhm.
So I think
Definitely.
it's so inspiring to hear. And so I have like one big question I want to make sure we get to before we run out of time, which is, where have you always gotten so much energy? Like, I'm sure for a lot of people they think like, how does she do so much?
Well, I think I'm gonna answer it in a way that might surprise you.
Okay.
One of my interests since I was a little girl was astrology, because I had this aunt that was like really advanced, and like she was a wide reader and she was interested in the esoterica, which like weirdly enough prepared me like, for future book publishing jobs. And like before I could read, like I was aware of like a good bit of astrology. It just clicked in my mind. And so then when I moved to San Francisco, like, I didn't have a TV or anything. I didn't even like really want one, but like I couldn't afford one if I'd wanted one. So I just read, and like I would go to bookstores and just hang out, and then like pick the next book that I wanted. And like, I read fiction, poetry, but I also always, made sure to like read a little astrology.
Huh.
And so I have like a whole shelf of books like that is just astrology. It's like very relaxing to me, like because it helps me feel like I understand other people, but it also helps me feel like I understand myself. So I at a certain point, like I was reading about my chart and like the different planetary placements and like what those mean for me. And I have Mercury in Aquarius, um, which is like an exalted placement, meaning that like that's the one of the best places you can have your Mercury be, is Mercury in Aquarius. So like there's a certain like keenness of mind that can come from
Ah,
that. And like and like searching for new ideas and like connecting ideas and things like that. And then I have Mars in Capricorn. Mars is your planet of drive. That is the planet in your chart that is like, determines like, what you're going to do and how you're going to get there. And I have Mars in Capricorn, as mentioned, and that is also an exalted placement. It's like the one of the best places you can have that planet.
ah.
So I think of my Mercury in Aquarius and my Mars in Capricorn as the twin engines of accomplishment, because Capricorn is very hardworking. The Capricorn sign is very hardworking, but having Mars in Capricorn means that I'm just a worker, and I am, like, and sometimes that's just flogging and not always glamorous, and just like, just getting like bits and pieces of stuff done, and all to the big goal. And I feel very lucky to have been like born like accidentally at that moment where I have those two planets, because like I can just get stuff done. And like, I know that like I might not even present in person as like a doer or a worker or like, somebody that is ambitious or whatever, but I am in my own way, not in the stock market way, but like I am in my own
Right.
way. Yeah. And like I think it's just like the stars. So I would say like it's the like, uh thank the stars like for that, because it has helped me in my life, because like, like me, like, the first day in San Francisco and like talking to the friends and like realizing, girl, you're going to have to make more money than you're going to have to make money today. And then I went out and got a job that day.
Yeah. I
But
know.
yeah, so like,
That was a surprising answer and a fun one, like really
yeah,
interesting. Does that mean, Brenda? Does that mean that it's kind of effortless, or are you saying it's just sort of like it's in the stars that you're driven?
it's how I'm built. It's how I'm wired. It's literally how my mind is wired, and then my will, because like Mars is like the planet of will. So I like, a common phrase is like the will to power. Like, so with somebody that like runs for public office or president or something like that, they have the will to power. Well, I have the will to accomplish what I care about. And because I have Mercury and Aquarius, I care about ideas. So I am driven to like work my fanny off on behalf of ideas.
That is great. I love how succinct that was, and I love that. Do you always know what? I mean, this is going to sound a little weird, but do you always know what you care most deeply about in order to have the will toward that?
No, I mean, like any other human, like sometimes I feel conflicted, because like I have a lot going on, but like I need to have a lot going on. Otherwise, probably like those two planets wouldn't be, satisfied. But I mean, like I'm also like, work with the Women's National Book Association.
Right. I forgot
Yeah,
all about that.
and like that's probably at least 90 minutes a day and sometimes more, and like, and that's volunteer, but like that's how I give back to the world,
Yeah.
right? So that's important to me. I have to have a way where I'm giving back, and so that matters a lot and is enormously meaningful to me. But occasionally I will feel like, oh wow, like there's this big thing happening with Women's National Book Association, and then there's this big thing happening with Mango, and then there's this wonderful big thing happening in my life, and I'll just sort of like have to like sort of recalibrate. And like what I will do is like my to-do list. But I mean, I can give you like an example of that, which is that I had Pitchorama, which is like where like authors like 100 authors are pitching 20 book agents. And it's an online mini writers conference, and it's really good and really helpful to people, which is of course what matters. And I produced it almost single-handedly this year. And it was because it was kind of easier to do it on my own, weirdly enough,
Ah,
because I just have it down. Like we had to like do the first like online Pitchorama, like obviously in the year 2020, we had to pivot from an in-person conference to an online conference. And so in this fourth year of doing that, I just know the steps,
right.
the steps. So it went very well, but it was that, I mean, that was probably, instead of just being like 90 minutes of, that was probably like 15 hours a week and minimum, like to
Wow.
produce that over months,
Right.
over months. And then I had sales conference happening like soon after that. And that's a big, huge thing that I have to prepare for and study all the books and rehearse for. And like and then, I have a life. Uh, so anyway, I had like a moment of like, oh girl, like maybe you like, like maybe this is too much. But like, so I just reprioritize and recalibrate and like just break down like what I have to do in steps, in smaller steps to get to the big steps. And like, so yeah, so that, and like both went very, very well, but like, but afterwards I did feel like sort of like an empty balloon, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you, because anyone listening, and I always love to hear people's process. Do you have like to-do lists, broken down in steps, written down? Do you use some digital tools? What do you use to track all of these many, many things?
I used to use a digital tool, but like it was like more of a hassle to like update that. And so I have like two to-do lists. I have like the regular to-do list, which might have at any given time probably has 50 items on it, large and small. And then I have like a list that I call the frog list, which is I read this book like I think it's Swallow That Frog.
Oh,
Brian Tracy, and the theory is the frogs are like the big gnarly tasks that like they're just sitting there like and like you're almost like, oh my god, like that is such a big gnarly task, like how can I do it? Brian Tracy's theory is that if you eat the frogs first thing in the day, you are
oh.
empowered and energized. And I believe it's true. I mean, it's worked for me for years. And so I have the to-do list and I have the list of frogs.
Can you, if it's not too personal, can you give us an example of a frog?
Yes. Yesterday, I had to book the event signings for American Library Association convention, which is in July in not Los Angeles, but like San Diego.
Okay.
And the ALA's interface is very clunky and slow, and like and so that was like I mean I think it took 45 minutes, so it wasn't like the most heinous frog on the block, but I was just dreading it because of the clunkiness and the fact that it like might go down when I'm halfway done and I have to start all over and like do it all over again. And so but I did it. I just was just like, okay, it's going on the frog list and I'm doing it. And then like after I had done it, I was just like, I felt like I was on cloud nine.
Oh, you were empowered, like you said. I love the way you
Yeah.
right. Wow. I love that. I love that. I like Brian Tracy, but I'd never heard about the frog list. So I think that that's a really helpful tool.
Yeah, and it's an easy read. I mean, I think it's probably like 120 pages max, and like I read that book and like I couldn't get over it. I like evangelized for it. Like I would tell everybody like you have to get this book. I used to like carry it around like because see I will sell other books too, like not necessarily just the books I publish. But if it's a book that is profoundly helpful to people, I want people to know about. I want to know about it, and I want people to know about it. So,
And it's a great example, right? I mean, it's a great example of how we read something and it sticks with us. I'm thinking similarly for me, like the Pomodoro method. I remember when I heard about that and I was like, whoa, Um, so I know we got 5 minutes. And one
yeah.
other question that I feel like is really important to ask you. You have many different roles. You wear many hats, we could say, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a writer, you're a blogger, the Women's National Book Association, probably even within your publishing job at Mango, I imagine you have many roles. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think in terms of roles, like is your day broken up or your week broken up into, here's the time I do this?
Somewhat. I mean, it really comes down to the priority, because like with book publishing, as you know, it's all about deadlines. And so I have to like service those deadlines first because you got to keep the trains on track. And
Right.
like that, that has like that's second nature to me now after doing so many years and doing it for so many years. And so I have like sort of a rhythm of my day that has come that's informed by like just years of experience, that like maybe this will be like a fun little thing for you to know too. Is that like I will save like little treat tasks, like they're my little like cookies or donuts, or
Oh,
little like treat tasks at the end of the day, and those are sales related, because like it excites me to like see book sales and see what's working. And we just opened a little fair store, Faire.
oh,
And Fair is like I think it's been around for like a year and a half or so. And it's like a little wholesale platform where you can go and like buy books and candles and t-shirts and like whatever you want, like anyone that is selling something on Fair. And instead of having to open an account with like Mango, like let's say you're a gardening store and you
right,
want to buy 3 of Mango's gardening books, but like you don't want to have to open an account. Like,
right.
that's a hassle. But like now you can buy Mango's gardening books and then like, gardening tools and gardening goodies and gardening gifts, like all on Fair. So like
Whoa,
the last thing I do like on of my work day is that I will treat myself like, and all day I'm like dying to know like what's happening on Fair, but I save it as my little treat, my dessert task for the end of the day. And I just look at it and I look at every sale and I look at every book and
oh,
and it feeds me in the same way that like looking outside my
right.
window at my beautiful garden feeds me.
I love that. I love that. We have time for one more question. And I feel like what I really would love to end on is the books that save lives. I feel
Yeah.
like coming full circle from little Brenda, her hands in her teacher and her teacher being able to see like you're going to do something. And just can you tell us about books that save lives?
Yeah, well, actually, it was born in Heart Wisdom because, like, we had like the holiday Heart Wisdom like 2 years ago, like with you as the wonderful hostess with the mostest, and Kim Colgrove, the author of Mindfulness for Warriors, was telling us about how grateful she was to be published by Mango and to work with me because like I discovered her in her book, and like and we decided collectively to publish it. And like she has had like first responders and veterans like come up to her at events and like make sure that like nobody else is around to hear this, and like said like I'm only here because of your book. And I mean, these are like grizzled old cops and like firefighters and like veterans, and like so there's stoic people,
Right.
and but like they had so much PTSD from like their job saving lives all day and all night, that like they were traumatized by it, and like they're not the type to like ask for help, but they found help in her book. And so like I remember that was the first spark of like, oh, our that book is saving lives, which is exactly what we wanted to do with it. So then at sales conference, the following one, I was presenting Fred Guttenberg's book on like, gun safety, and like American Carnage, like, and how like we need to, get to common sense, like gun safety laws and things like that. And so I said, this is a book that saved lives. And then I brought several other books, including Kim Colgrove's. And I said, actually, Mango's published several books that save lives. And so the sales rep said, books that save lives, you have to do something with that. And I said, like what? And they said, well, maybe like a catalog page or something like that. And I literally put books that save lives on the top of my to-do list. And and it was there for like some months. Like when I would do a new to-do list, I would put it at the top right. And I just ran a low, slow program on it. And then I was like, one day I just had like, I guess my Mercury in Aquarius like finally fired that synapse, and I realized it should be an imprint.
Oh.
And like I didn't have a chance to send you, but like Books That Save Lives and I like are in Publishers Weekly this week, and it came out
You
yesterday.
are? Oh, what a celebration this is. This
Yeah.
feels perfect. Oh, Brenda, I love this. And you know what I love the most? I know our time is up this moment for this Heart Wisdom panel, but you are so full of vitality. You have so much yet to offer. And it's like, I can't wait to see where else this beautiful journey takes you.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the places it's going to take me is like with your book, like coming out early next year. With each passing day, I feel like that book is more and more and more important. I really do, Sherry. And so, like, as a closing thought, like I'm excited about yours and my collaboration, and like both of your books, which are filled with wisdom of the heart.
That is so wonderful. I am just personally super grateful to you. And on behalf of the world, and all of the authors, everyone who's read any of the books that you've printed, really thank you. We're so lucky. And this has been a gift. I really love this kind of stepping back and getting to celebrate the journey, especially with that news that you gave us at the end about being in Publishers Weekly, right? That's what you said.
Right. Hot
That's
off the press.
I mean, what a beautiful, I just love that. Such a celebration. And I'm so grateful to you, Brenda.
Well, I'm very grateful to you and like all the care and love and time you put into these Heart Wisdom panels, because like, I will never forget that that was the origin of Books That Save Lives.
I love that. I love that. Well, I'm happy to be on your team and I can't wait for whatever's next. I know we're going to do some special Heart Wisdoms coming up in the future about books that save lives. So stay tuned, everyone, for that. So,
Right.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Love to you.
Love
Bye
to
bye.
you. Thank you.